Welcome back. This next session will be taking a deep dive into your life story. Here's Dave.
Let your life speak. I love that old Quaker saying because it reminds us that our life is not just a random series of historical events that you walk through, but your life is full of moments and people and seasons and opportunities and failures and tragedies that shape us and point us to the future. So in a way, your life story speaks. It says something about you, and I maintain that actually points to your calling and your destiny. So let me break that down for you and talk about the specifics of your life story. In your life, you've had positive people. Mentors, family members, significant people of your life, coaches, leaders who have influenced you. They've pushed you to excellence. They've inspired you. They've shaped you. I was really moved when I was talking to one of our ATO brothers at LSU last year and he was reflecting to me how he realized how the impact his grandmother's self-giving love had changed him. And he told me he was inspired to treat others the way his grandma treated others. So she had a positive, huge impact on his life. And by the way, side note, the more I talk with people about destiny and calling and influence in their life, grandmas and grandpas play a huge role in people's lives. There was this NFL player that I talked with once that you would expect when he reflected on the positive people in his life that he would point to maybe one of his professional football coach or college football coach, but he was deeply inspired by his college admission advisor. And the reason why is because getting into college was no easy thing for him. And he came from a tough family situation, and this college advisor took him under his wing, and it just changed how he viewed the world. My own story, way back when I was in high school, had a teacher. She was actually the choral director. Her name was Miss Bruno. And the reason why I look back and I point to her, because she painted a picture for me that I had a future. She made me think I could do anything. More than just give me confidence, she showed me the power of believing in people. And in no small way, she's the reason why I'm here helping you to consider the same thing, that you matter in this world. Positive people. Negative people also show up in our lives. And we don't want to think about negative people. We'd rather not process it. But in odd ways, and in powerful ways, negative people can point us to our calling as well. Because when a negative person impacts you, many times we may not say this out loud or even think this exactly, but in our core, we think, I don't ever want to be that kind of person like that negative person in my life. And so we end up becoming somebody completely opposite. When I was not that young. I was in my mid-20s, and I had a boss who did not show me my future. As a matter of fact, I felt like this guy beat me down every time he could. He demeaned me and belittled me. And again, I wanted to be the opposite of that in other people's lives. Whereas he did not point to my future, I want to be the opposite of that. I want to point people to their future and their calling. So even negative people can affect us in how we move into the world. There are positive circumstances and moments in our lives that shape us. And you can probably think of all these wonderful moments you've had, maybe one or two or three, and maybe a whole bunch of these circumstances where good things happen to you and you smile when you think about it. I met a young couple who spent a summer in Alabama just investigating an organization that was working with children in rural Alabama. And they saw so many children who were alone and without love. And even though that was sad for them to see, they saw the potential, what it would be like to help children be loved. And what it eventually led to in their life is they became these uber foster parents. They took in foster kids, dozens of foster kids, and eventually adopted many of them. And so this circumstance that started with just this experience in Alabama became the driving calling of their life. There was a young woman I once talked with. Her whole life turned around just from going to a conference in Boston where she heard a guy who had significant disabilities speaking to the crowd of young people saying, you can be all that you want to be. And she determined to do that, a positive circumstance in her life. My son, in a moment of indecision in his life, ended up in India with some friends. And one day we were talking long distance via phone, and he said, I don't know what to do with my life. He said, all I'm really doing right now is I'm just writing my experiences on the streets of New Delhi. And I said, why don't you do that with your life? I said, because hundreds of people are reading you. Why don't you become a journalist? And in that moment, that positive experience, he determined to become an international journalist. See, positive moments or seasons shake us out of the same old of our lives. They show us that there's something more going on around us. They give us a bigger picture. Maybe you've done a volunteer event, or maybe you went on a trip somewhere, a mission trip, or maybe it's a class you took in college or high school that help you rethink your life. Positive circumstances can do that. Then we have negative or painful circumstances. Now, again, most of us don't want to think about the bad stuff, but I'm suggesting to you that there may be gold buried in the bad circumstances. At least you can find some signposts for your future, whether it's pain or tragedy or loss or disappointment. There's an old saying from the Bible that I like that says, the comfort that you've received in your troubles is the comfort that you then pass on to other people. So if you've gone through pain or a negative circumstance in your life, it may be, and the comfort, maybe you've come out of it better, you've come out of it whole. That then you can describe to another person who's going through that circumstance what it's like to come through it, and you can actually guide them as they do their own processing of their pain. It can shape your whole calling out. I watched a Netflix series called Lenox Hill. It was a documentary on a hospital in New York City. And I was taken with the story of one of the doctors. He's a brain surgeon. But in the middle of the very first episode, he said that his father, who was also a doctor, by the way, there's that positive person in his life. He became a doctor because his dad was a doctor. But there was even more than that. His dad died of brain cancer. And this young man decided, I want to give my life to something. The circumstance of losing his dad was so painful, but he wanted to give his life to solving that same cancer problem in others. And now he's one of the most renowned brain cancer surgeons in the entire country. I know a man who grew up in deep poverty. Deep poverty. It's the worst story of poverty I've ever heard. He's come to the point in his life where he recognizes that was a painful past, but now he's committed to spending time with young men and young women who may have come from similar circumstances and helping them find their way in the world. Talk with an ATO brother who struggled most of his life with isolation and depression, but began to understand that him coming out of isolation and depression was something he can offer to other people who are struggling with it as well. You have occasions of pain, loss, and disappointment that have influenced you. How have they shaped you and maybe point to your future? And finally, in our life story, there are groups, communities, teams, fellowships. Maybe it's a club, or maybe a church, or a small group of friends, or maybe an organization that helped you to live for something bigger than yourself. We want you to become a second mountain person, pursuing your destiny, but there are also second mountain organizations. I believe ATO is a second mountain organization because of our desire to push one another to achieve more than we could imagine on our own. Schools can be second mountain organizations, companies, organizations, and maybe you were part of one of those. And that help define you and shape you. What did these organizations or groups or teams, what did they inspire you to do with your life? These are all aspects of your life story. They are individual patches on the quilt, which is your life. So we want to now move to you start capturing your life story. And so I'm going to walk through some guiding questions that you'll find in your workbook. And you can fill in, answer these questions in your workbook, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do after I walk through these questions. Question number 1, as you think about your life, who are the positive mentors and significant people in your life that have influenced you? How have they shaped you? What did they inspire you to do with your life? List them, name them, and describe the influence they had in your life. Second question, who are the people who have had a strong negative influence on your life? And how did they influence you? And what have they told you about what you want to become in this world? What are the life-altering times and moments and seasons that have positively changed you and influenced you and transformed you? Name them. When did it happen? What did you feel? What was the circumstance or that you were in that shaped your future? Another question, what are the occasions of pain, loss, brokenness, or disappointment that have influenced you? This may be hard to process as you go back and rethink your pain and your brokenness. But name them. Name these seasons. Name the disappointment. And think about how you've received comfort in it and maybe how you can give comfort to others through it. List those. And then finally, what communities, groups, or organizations have shaped you and how? Who have they called you to be? Now, this is a lot of data here. From the positive people, the negative people, the positive moments and the negative moments, and the groups and organizations. List them all. Answer all these questions. And then once you're done with that, we're going to take you, I want you to go to the calling quilt, which you'll find in your workbook. And I want, thinking chronologically, starting at the top left of your calling quilt, enter your answers to the questions I just walked through, one at a time, each one of them as an individual patch on your calling quilt. We're going to give you a good chunk of time to answer these questions and then fill in the patches of your calling quilt. And when we come back, we'll focus our attention on your personality.